Hey everybody, Ethan here from WordTech, back with another video, and this is one I have been wanting to make for a very long time. And I'm glad to be finally getting to this because it's been a long time coming. So this is a giant laptop that I have here, and what this video is going to be is a little bit of a talking head video, basically almost maybe a rant of me going through why I think this class of laptop is dead, why that sucks for you, the consumer, and also tease a little bit about the fact that I'm going to be bringing on an even beefier desktop replacement laptop from like a decade ago onto the channel here soon, and I will be doing a dedicated video on that. Very excited to go over that because that's even better than this in a lot of ways. So I wanted to start off kind of just going through, we're going to go through a little bit of categories here. And basically I first want to, before you jump into the comments and say that there are still desktop replacement laptops, look at the Blade 18, which is huge. Look at the MSI Titan, which is the closest that we have to it. I will get to that and address why I don't consider any of those desktop replacement laptops a little bit later in the video. The first thing I want to do is define what I think a desktop replacement laptop is, and then we can talk about the advantages of these and why I think it's unfortunate and the consumer is missing out now that these really aren't a thing anymore. And then a big part of this is going to be talking about obviously the performance that you get from something like this, but the reliability, which is another aspect that I actually have other videos on the channel talking about how I don't think reliable Windows laptops exist. Spoiler alert, this has been the most reliable Windows laptop that I've had in the last 10 years. So that'll tell you something. The thing this video will not be is going over and actually showing you the performance benchmarks of it. You can already see benchmarks of this machine. You can already see benchmarks of the RTX 3080 mobile full wattage. So I'm not going to be going over that. That's also something I can't do because this has just been factory reset and is being ready to be passed off to a friend of mine. So it's not my laptop anymore, and I'm not going to, it's a fresh Windows install ready for him. I'm not going to be going and installing benchmarks and stuff because again, that's already been covered. So to start off here, I kind of want to define what I feel like a desktop replacement laptop is, because what I think it is not is just a large bulky laptop or an 18-inch laptop. I don't think that is a desktop replacement laptop. The Blade 18 is still trying to be a laptop. It's a large format laptop. Is it going to be great to use in your lap? It's going to be okay. The Titan, not going to be very good to use in your laptop, in your lap, but it's just a bulky laptop. It is still using laptop components. And so I don't think large equals DTR. I think a desktop replacement needs to mean more. And in my mind, and this is, there's no outline, there's no spec outline for what this really means, but in my mind, a DTR means it should have a lot of the characteristics of a desktop. It is designed to replace a desktop. That may be performance, that may be upgradability, that may be repairability, that may be ports, and we'll get to each of those. Just to outline there, I don't think that those large laptops are DTRs. I don't think they fit into that category. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is desktop componentry. And even better, in the next video or the next laptop video I do of that other one that's about a decade old, it's even better where it has full desktop components throughout. But this laptop here is the Clevo X170KM-G, I think is the model number. It's actually the Sager one. Brands rebrand the Clevo chassis. That's kind of how it works. So Clevo makes the chassis, and then the system integrators build the system and actually configure it the way that you want, install the OS, all that other stuff. And this model in particular has a socketed Intel CPU. This is a 6700K that is, or no, it might be 11700K. Sorry, 6700K is a different machine. 11700K is running in this machine. Full socketed, fat desktop CPU that you can replace yourself. You can upgrade to an 11900K. You could start with an i5 and then upgrade from there. A huge number of the 11th gen chips are supported on this motherboard, and 10th gen I believe as well. So you get the upgradability that you have from that, as well as you do get the full performance that you would get out of that chip as long as you're not overclocking as you would in a desktop, which of course leads to a lot of noise, which we'll get to. Now this also has 4 M.2 slots, which is fantastic. That's not something you're going to see in any other laptop except the MSI Titan has 3 or 4, I can't remember, but the vast majority have 2. And a lot of times they have 1, and if they do have 2, they might have a 2230 or something smaller. So this is full 4 2280 M.2 SSDs supporting this. One is even PCIe Gen 5, the other are Gen 4. So you get to have a lot of expandability. That means in theory, without using QLC, you could have 32 terabytes of storage in this. That is a ridiculous amount of solid state storage for a workstation type machine, which in many ways these are designed to replace. So That's kind of the first component to me, is it needs to have desktop parts. It's better if it has desktop everything. Back in history, we had MXM 3.0 boards where you had a daughter board for the GPU, so your GPU is upgradable without replacing your motherboard. That was amazing, and more to come on that in the future. But at least this has a socketed CPU and lots of expandable storage. The other thing to me is it needs to, in many ways, be easy to work on like a desktop. Now, it's never going to be as easy, but it needs to be easier to work on, and you need to be able to do stuff to it. And with this, you very much so can. It's not as easy to, repair as a framework or something like that, but you can put in a new CPU, you can put in more M.2s, you can replace almost every component in the system. The keyboard's actually quite easy. In fact, the keyboard replacement on this is really easy to do. Borderline as easy as a framework. Every other part of it you can work on, and components are pretty easily available. Maybe not now, but back when this was new, components were pretty easily available. Now, it's not all standardized, so you don't have quite the advantage that you have with a desktop where 120 millimeter fan goes out. Those are going to be available. They were available 20 years ago. They're going to be available 20 years from now. I don't expect the fans in this to be available 20 years from now, but at least you have the ability to work on them. And that's an important part, I think, something as a consumer that we should be paying more attention to and trying to make things a little less disposable. The other thing is that this has a lot of ports. So the ports on this, I'm not going to go over all of them in detail, but it has multiple Thunderbolt, multiple DisplayPort, HDMI, tons of USB, has all the stuff, right? So lots of ports. So if you need to plug into a ton of stuff like you would a desktop, you have enough ports to do it. You're not relying just on a Thunderbolt dock and expecting those to be reliable, which they never fucking are. So you're not dealing with that. And that is another big component to this as well. I feel like, again, the idea is that you need to be in a situation where this is as similar to a desktop as you can while having it in a form factor like this. Now, performance is another aspect to this, where obviously a laptop this bulky needs to perform really well. You're not going to get a Threadripper performance out of something like this, although there have been some Threadripper chips put in laptops. But in general, the idea is like you're going to be getting enough performance that you're not leaving a bunch on the table just because it's a laptop. You might pay more for it, but when this was around with the RTX 30 series and the 1100 series CPUs, like you could put an 11900K in here, it would perform pretty close to what you would see in a desktop 11900K. You also could put, you could get the 3080, which is what this one has, the RTX 3080. Now that was the mobile 3080, unfortunately, not a full fat desktop 3080. But the overall point was this performed better than every laptop in the world at the time for the things that it's meant to do. I'm not talking, there are specific tasks that will change that, obviously, like the MacBooks at the time outperformed on certain things with Apple Silicon. Not going to get into that. But the point is, this was a monster at the time, and there are plenty of benchmarks that you can see of these machines out there. And I think Jared's Tech actually has probably my favorite one where, yeah, I just topped the charts, which is expected. It's also incredibly noisy because it has a lot of thermal, dissipation that it has to deal with of these two, large, high RPM fans. Also, it had two power bricks. Both of these have to be used at the same time. You cannot use just one. So yeah, we can jump into some of the downsides now as well to desktop replacement laptops, and then we'll talk about reliability and kind of get into why I feel like this is very sad and is a dead category. The downsides are that they're enormous. You can see that this is enormous. I think it weighs almost 10 pounds without the power brick. You can see how massive the backside is here. Lots of areas for heat sink to dissipate that heat. They're just enormous. You don't really want to sit with this in your lap. It's not a good experience. On top of that, the battery life is terrible because it uses desktop components, and desktop components mean that like the RTX 3080 in here is actually wired directly to the display. The iGPU is not used at all. I can't remember if you can even enable the iGPU in the BIOS for this. Maybe you can't. I'm not 100% sure there, but the point is that you get some advantages there, which we'll get to in a second, but the battery life is terrible. We're talking like an hour on battery doing nothing. No gaming or anything like that, just browsing the web. Because that 3080 is such a power hog, you are just running that battery down like crazy. You've got two power bricks that you have to keep with you at all times that are huge and heavy. These are each 280 watt power bricks, so they're just monsters, and almost as big of a power brick as you can get for a laptop. I think the Titan is like a 350 watt or something like that now. But point is, it's not convenient to carry around all the time. Like if you're traveling all the time and you don't need the best of the best performance, it might kind of suck. So I want to talk about why I think it is sad that this category of laptop is gone. I've already kind of gone over what my definition is and why I feel like nothing currently really fits it. And in fact, in some ways, Framework would be the closest because they're repairable. But I really am disappointed to be seeing these just gone, because I do think that there's a segment of the market where they make sense for, and maybe there has been misunderstanding amongst consumers about what these are meant to do, and people maybe having an aversion to them because they're so big. If you are in a situation, and I feel like a lot of people are in a situation where you're not living in the same place all the time, right? Like people travel for work, or they, travel between homes or whatever. There's plenty of reasons why you might not be at the same bed every night, right? I'm not talking about like you're having life troubles. I'm just saying there's a lot of people that live that way. I'm not that person, but a lot of people that live that way. Maybe you house sit for people a whole bunch or something, right? Being able to have your entire system this compact, considering that it's basically a desktop, and bring that with you is a huge advantage. You get the best performance possible. Sure, it's in a heavy bag, but as long as you're not having to walk around campus with it or something, then it's not, a huge burden to just put this in a backpack and then put it in your car or whatever, right? And you get all of that performance wherever you need to go. And so you don't even need to buy a separate laptop. This can be your only machine, and it can have your 32 terabytes of solid state storage in it, and it can have 128 gigs of RAM in it, and it can have, historically a desktop GPU in it, not anymore, but desktop CPU. So you can do your whole, like all of your work or your gaming or whatever you want to do on just this one machine. And you can plug it in when you get home, take it with you places. You don't have to have two separate systems, which will actually cost you less money, this will, than having two separate systems if you needed a high-end laptop and a high-end desktop wherever you go. This is enough to replace both. So I think that's a huge disadvantage to the consumers, not being able to have this category of a laptop like available at all anymore. There's another side to this, which is the repairability. Until Framework was around, these were the most repairable laptops that you could get. And again, not perfect, nowhere near as easy as Framework to replace a lot of the parts in Framework. It's so much easier, and there's better tutorials so the person can just do it. But if you know how to service laptops, these are easy to work on, and the thin and lights that you have now are not. That is a disposability problem in my mind, where you have disposable machines now, and so many electronics are going in that direction. And I think sometimes it can make a little bit of sense. Now, I'm very much so on the side of right to repair, to be clear, which is probably obvious if you've ever watched my channel. But there are some things where I understand a little more of, like a foam, where you're trying to make it as thin and light as possible, and it's harder to make those repairable. But something like a laptop is not something that's so small that I feel like you shouldn't be designing it to be repairable, and Framework has proven that, where you can get laptops smaller than the Frameworks, but not that much smaller, not that much lighter, and they're not repairable at all. These were quite repairable, and historically, the older one that I'll bring on the channel in the future was even more repairable because the GPU was easy to replace, or GPUs. Yes, you could have more than one. So that's a huge downside in my mind. So I feel like consumer choice has kind of eroded a little bit, where now you're just choosing the screen size you want on your thin and light laptop. And it's hard to work on, it's hard to take apart, it's not upgradable, it's designed to be disposable, the batteries blow. Oh, guess what? The battery on this just comes out. It just comes out. You can just swap it. You don't have to take it apart. It's incredible. You don't have to do anything special. So if you have a battery problem, you just replace it or carry an extra one with you if you need to for whatever reason. And so a lot of that stuff is just gone now, where again, the closest you really have to it is the MSI Titan, but that's all laptop parts. It's just got a lot of cooling and a lot of M.2 slots so that you get like, good performance for a laptop. It's the best performing laptop that you can really get. But it's not this. It's not the same thing as this. It doesn't scratch that same itch that I have, and it doesn't remove the frustration I have, where you're gonna make something that large and you're telling me that you can't just put desktop components in it and give us those other advantages. And I think the final aspect that I wanna talk about here actually loops back to a video I made a long time ago, and I'll try and link that in whatever corner it's supposed to go in, or description or whatever. YouTube's changed a bit since I've been on it last. But I don't think it's easy to get a reliable Windows laptop. This is something I've complained about for a very long time. Windows on laptops sucks. The way their power states suck. The C states don't make sense. The sleep states don't make sense. They don't work right. They don't go into sleep when they're supposed to. Components can keep the laptops awake. I have had more than a dozen laptops over the last 7 years that I have used as daily drivers. All of them Windows-based except for a Mac that I had one time. And none of them were reliable, except this one, which I'll get to in a sec. None of them were reliable. They all had tons of problems. I'd outline more in that video, but things like they won't go to sleep, or their fans won't stop spinning, or the display goes blank because the MXM chip, or not MXM, whatever they're called, the chip, I can't believe I'm forgetting that, but the chip that you have that switches the display between the integrated and the desktop, or the dedicated GPU, would bug out, and then you would just have a blank display or a frozen display, and you'd have to toggle that chip off and back on again. Things wouldn't work right. Like Advanced Optimus does not work right. It is not reliable. I had to turn it off on my Zephyrus G16, which has a 4070 in it. Like, it's a pretty new laptop, and I bought it a year ago, and I had to turn off Advanced Optimus because it just didn't work correctly. All kinds of issues. You don't have very much laptop parts here. So you're in a situation where you can install Windows and it's as reliable as it is on a desktop, which is still not great, and there's still a lot of problems with Windows, and a lot of people should really be looking at moving to Linux right now, and maybe I'll make a dedicated video on that. There's a lot of talk about that stuff right now, all the AI being shoved down our throats. But the point is, I have had Windows desktops that are relatively reliable. They don't have these horrendous usability nightmare issues of not going to sleep or being dead in your bag or updating in your bag or whatever. This one, though, didn't run across those issues. You don't have to deal with Advanced Optimus. Guess what? You just have a dedicated GPU like you would in a desktop wired directly to this display. So there's no iGPU to deal with. There's no GPU switching to deal with. You gotta sacrifice battery life for that, but you get reliability. And that has been a huge part. Is for me, this laptop has been the most reliable laptop, even above my frameworks, that I've had in the last 10 years. And about 10 years ago, was another desktop replacement laptop that was just as reliable or slightly more reliable than this. This chassis unfortunately has a minor cooling issue where if the fans are at idle for too long, the soundboard can actually start to overheat. So that's a little annoying. You have to adjust the fan speeds manually to make that not a problem. You bump them up 10%, then it's never an issue again. But point is, from a Windows perspective, this was the most reliable you could get. And I'm really sad to see this category of laptop going by the wayside. And maybe most of that was because of sales. Maybe most of that was because of marketing leading to sales. Here's our thin and light laptop. Why would I buy that monster when I can get something that performs really well that is also thin and light without the logic check that unless you're carrying it around every day, who cares if it weighs 15 pounds? If it's more repairable, more reliable, and more performant, and you're only walking it to your car and then walking it into another building, that's not really that bad. I carried this thing to and from work every day for years. And it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad because guess what? It's just walking to my car. It's not a big deal. And that's one example, but I think it's just really sad that we are losing out on this type of laptop. DTRs are basically dead, if not completely dead. In my mind, completely dead. And I'm not sure that we're going to get another one at least for a very long time again, because Clevo has also basically or completely given up on making chassis like this. And that is sad to my heart. And maybe some of that is nostalgia because I have always loved these beasts. I've had several of them and I adore them. So maybe some of this is nostalgia, but I feel like there's a real aspect, again, to the performance, repairability and upgradability, and reliability, which are huge things that these would beat every other laptop at the time for. And all of the Clevo desktop replacement laptops, as far as I'm aware, were the best performing laptops out of any laptop in the world at the time when they released, of that generation of laptops. And now we don't have that anymore. And there may be a component of that NVIDIA has made it so that I don't even know if you're legally allowed to put a desktop GPU in a laptop anymore. Now again, I don't know, not a lawyer. I've just seen talk online that they are not supporting MXM anymore, so you can't have MXM 3.0, so you can't have daughter boards for GPUs that are upgradable. You can't have socketed GPUs, not that there's reasons that doesn't make sense, but you may not even be allowed to do it, I'm not sure. But regardless, it's harder than it used to be because you don't have those MXM boards that can be done separately. And more to come on that in the following video talking about an even bigger, even beefier desktop replacement laptop. Anyway, everybody, thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts below. Let me know if you think I am just losing my mind, which I am. So I'm insane. So, you know, let me know why. I would love to see the engagement down there. And thank you, everybody, for coming back to the channel.